recommendation to the first selectman's committee, town, whatever, board, thank you, for the purposes of handling the HVAC and renovations or updates at Polson and at Hand. So I'll turn it over to Peter. I don't know if you're going to start us off.
I think Craig was going to do a little bit of a.
Craig, I'm sorry. I apologize. I did.
No problem. Yeah, no problem at all. Just a very brief intro. I think we all know kind of where we're at. We got some pricing on some options, and I know since the last time we met, Peter and Ben have been working really hard on what some alternatives could be, and they're ready to present that. So without further ado, I'll just turn it over to Peter and Ben to kind of show what they've been working on at a, I know, and they'll say this too, I'm sure, very high level. So they haven't had time to, price things out to, a real fine area, but they do have some general numbers based on previous work. They're not just pulling numbers out. They've done a lot of hard work based on previous projects that they've been involved in, or no other districts that have been involved in. So I'll turn it over to Peter and Ben.
Thank you. As you know, we had a serious shortfall on funding for this project, so it forced us to take a real hard look at what we could possibly do to make this happen in a more positive fashion in regards to spending a lot of money and not having to have the public see what was actually done, and then having a job that was done halfway or partially. We came up with a really good solution to this, and actually, to Ben's credit, he's got an awful lot of experience with this type of a project. So I'm going to turn this over to Ben and let him go from here.
Thank you. I appreciate the time today to kind of let us pitch this this slightly different approach, and feel free to stop me at any time as I go through this, or say, hey, you're giving us too much technical information, or you're going too fast or going too slow, or whatever. Basically, what we're proposing here today is shifting the project over into an incremental approach to deploying the capital available. And the overall goals are to meet the flavor and intention of the referendum, but actually greatly improving the customer experience of the building and adding value to the building, like all good capital projects should do. What this does is it again uses an incremental approach to do a 4-year slate of sub-projects, we'll call them, to maximize the funding that's available. So at the end of this 4-year process, it's not just going to be HVAC improvements or just an auditorium, but we'll have cooling in all the educational spaces. It'll renew the building's envelope, roof, windows. It's going to have the community use spaces, the gym and the auditorium fully renovated, not partial, not leaving some hazardous materials behind or anything like that, fully renovating them, getting rid of, speaking of hazardous materials, getting rid of all the asbestos flooring in the building and replacing that. So basically, by using this project mix approach, just as you would if you were building a 5-year capital plan for any portfolio, we're kind of breaking this project up into smaller pieces. And there's a couple of advantages to do that versus this one large project. The first, and in some ways the most important, especially given all the moving pieces in the district this last couple of years, and especially next year, the school is kept fully functional for the entire project duration. There is zero customer impact. Work that has to be done on second shift will. Other than that, it's going to be summer work, or we can work around the school's operations. There's no moving of staff and students. The other really nice thing about this approach is we found ourselves in not just this project, but a couple of them that we have going on right now, that we're kind of in a position where we're pinned because the job is we wanted to build it, we can't afford it. Then we go into this value engineering, which is a very dirty term. And what that means is we don't get what we want, but we spend the money that we had to spend. So what this allows us to do is unanticipated cost increases and conditions in any one individual project don't jeopardize the entire project, because we're using an incremental approach. And the way we've programmed these and broken them out into years, which I'll get into in a minute, if we run into higher than anticipated costs in year one, We just alter a project that's further down the line and that's a lower priority. We don't get into a gridlock where now we're doing nothing. So we're continuing to improve the building and getting something up off the ground. Another thing with this plan is it leverages the existing design work that's already been done. So we don't want to give the illusion to the community that we're throwing good money after bad. Now, granted, there is going to be some redesign work, but we're trying to use as much of that work that's already been done and build that, especially into year one. It also, for year one, maintains the existing project team. So we've got a really good construction manager on board. We have a good design team on board. Let's leverage that and continue to do the almost half of the work in year one using that project team that has a lot of moving pieces to it where we really need a construction manager. Then in years 2 through 4, we could self-perform or self-manage these projects because, again, they're broken up into little pieces. Also try to maximize state grant funding with these. For example, when you do an asbestos floor project, that's a really easy project to do through the state school construction grant program. It takes about a year to get everything up and running with that, but it's a very straightforward project to do with them. These projects are all within the existing parameters of the referendum too. So that's really important to know as well, that we are hitting the intention of the referendum. And at the end of these 4 years, what's really important is this building is going to have a new feel to it. It's also not going to require heavy capital investment for the next 7 to 10 years. So again, we are now essentially doing a little mini SIP. Well, not really mini, it's $20 million, but we're doing a SIP for this specific building, and we're able to tackle those projects that are in our SIP right now, like the roof project, for example, is in there. So what that allows us to do is decrease capital spending on this building for the next 7 to 10 years because we're hitting all those major objects. Any questions kind of on the overall before I'll share my screen and pull up the individual projects and kind of walk you through what we were thinking for project flow?
Thank you, Ben. I just have a quick question. I really appreciate this overview. Can you just clarify what, if any, would be new to the project, or is it just sort of the overall improvements like you mentioned from the CIP? Like,
sure.
Are there?
I think if I go through the project list, I could kind of categorize them as same as existing that's altered, or new, if that makes sense, or it's in the SIP and we're pushing it forward.
Perfect. That's
okay. Cool.
Thank you.
I think one of the things too, Emily, along that same line that I like the fact that, and I think Peter alluded to it at the beginning, Ben's coming at this with a new set of eyes. He has a tremendous amount of experience. And I love the fact that we are not blindly moving forward without taking this second step, because as I've said from the beginning, and I think we've all said, we don't want to have another hand where we make bad decisions after bad decisions and we keep staying the course because we don't have a fresh set of eyes on it. And I think this is great. So thank you.
One other just comment is like, why didn't we think of this from the beginning? Sort of, it seems like, oh, what a great idea.
Yeah.
So,
and also because it doesn't disrupt the schools, right? I mean, we have so much going on in the district. We need to minimize the impact on students. They're vulnerable. We need to make sure that they're protected through all this. We're trying to, in the end, do something that's good for them, but not at the expense of hurting them or the disruption of their educational experience. And I think this is a great way to approach that.
I agree.
And there's no harm in, looking back and kind of after actioning from where we got to this point is a valuable experience because you learn for the next time. But what seemed right 3 or 4 years ago, it could have been right. It just didn't work out that way. And there's different ways to look. I can't tell you how many projects that we've been off and running on. And one of my staff has come to me as like, hey, I just thought of this morning. And I'm like, oh my God, if we had done this 2 years ago, but you can't worry about that. We're like, hey, we're here now. Let's try it. And if it's the direction we want to go, we go. And you know what? We might get halfway through this plan and that changes as well. But I've always preached the terms with capital planning: tangible, realistic, and flexible. So you want it to be projects that are actually tangible. They're realistic for you to actually develop and build, but also remain flexible because things do change. We had a huge roof program going on a few years ago, and roof prices, EPDM rubber roofing was through the roof. There were material shortages and everything. We paused 1 year. The next year, we're like, we have to do this. Like, we have to keep moving. And we did one roof, and it was twice the price we wanted to pay. And the next year it went down. But like, who knew that was going to happen?
Right, right.
You
You
need
gotta
a
be
new roof, and you need a
flexible.
new roof.
Yeah, yeah. That's helpful.
So let me share my screen here. And this is rough. This is, can everybody see that? Just give me a
Yes.
thumbs up real quick.
Yeah.
Okay. This is kind of like the how the sausage was made type thing. So it's got some of my internal notes in here, but it gives you a couple things. One is the construction year. So this is generally speaking when we want to package this project. So several of them are in year one. Like I said, year one are the ones we would probably do using the existing project team. Then it goes into 2, 3, and 4. So they're not in any priority within the year, but the years themselves kind of state the priorities, if that makes sense. Project is kind of the name we're giving to the sub-project. Scope summary, just really brief what it is. The budget that we've assigned to it, again, these are very high level numbers. There's an estimated local share. So many of these projects are eligible for state school grant reimbursement. Madison's rate is 29.29. I've carried 25 because there's always something the state finds that they say is not eligible, or something when you're into the project, it really makes a lot of sense to do and you don't want to not do it because it's not eligible. Under my notes columns here is just basically for me to remember how I got to that number. So first and foremost, this is, and I'll try to weave in what's part of the existing project and what would be new. The first one is the biggest revision. So what we're doing with this approach is we're adding cooling to all classrooms not currently cooled. Now, this is not a full-blown air side ventilation and cooling system. What we're doing is we're relying on the building's existing ventilation system, which there's nothing wrong with it. Buildings are set up like this. We exhaust air all day long through that building, and we're adding cooling to the classroom. So this is not ripping out systems. We are strictly adding cooling systems through what's called a VRF ductless split system. So if you think about what some of you might have in your house, just a little ductless split cassette hanging on the wall, but it's a commercial version of that. So instead of, one outdoor unit and two or three indoor units, it's one outdoor unit and 12 indoor units doing a bank of classrooms. They use things called branch boxes to direct refrigerants. It's not just like a residential style system. It's a permanent installation. I've deployed this in a project with 250 classrooms in my past life. People love it. It works great. Now it's not a 30-year solution. You could get 10 years out of these. Sometimes I've seen them running for 12 to 15. But again, when you go to replace these down the road, it's also a lot less expensive. I carried 45 spaces at $30,000 a space. Again, I'm learning this building more and more every day. That number, we even could bring that down to maybe 40. A decent amount of that school is air conditioned already through airside systems that have ventilation and everything built in. So this is adding in that supplemental. So this is the biggest change in the project. Instead of running ductwork all over a 1960s, 1970s building, which I'm telling you right now, I don't care if you scan the ceiling or not, which we've done, you are going to have problems putting ductwork into that building. This is minimally invasive into the building. We could do the anything in the building on second shift, and a lot of the site work that you could do during the school year, setting the pads, the outdoor units, things like that. Low impact project, and it gets cooling to these spaces. The second one is, I think if I could just run through them and then we could just back into questions after that, because I think I'll answer some questions throughout this. Second one is pretty straightforward. This is replacing the HVAC in spaces currently cooled. So this is a slight modification to what's there now. So in the current plan, we are replacing the existing HVAC. However, that quickly got value engineered out, and we were going to leave all the current equipment in there. That equipment is at the end of life. It's a little bit wacky of a system up there. The system that we'd be proposing, again, it's not fully designed yet, but it's installing regular old packaged rooftop units, kind of similar to what we have at hand or any commercial building, instead of using some of the it's slightly more efficient technology that was proposed in the initial design. But again, that was already quickly value engineered out. So this is replacing these units, heating and cooling, tried and true systems. You pick the old ones off the roof, you put the new ones on the penthouses. No surgery to the building. Again, it's pick and replace, just like we're doing at hand. That number came right from Gilbane's value engineering schedule. So we want to make sure that that's in the project. So when we're done with this, we're done with year one, the entire building not only has cooling, but it has new systems throughout. We're not leaving any of the old cooling systems in place. Second one is a renovation to the main gym. So this is taking a portion of the building. You'll hear this a lot from me in the future, but like, if you're going to enter a space and we're going to get destructive in the space, let's fix the space while we're in it. So this is going into the gym, refurbishing the flooring, changing the bleachers, installing a rooftop unit for cooling and heating, which doesn't exist now. That was part of the new plan. Again, half the gym got value engineered out. We've been playing around with, auxiliary gym versus main gym. The auxiliary gym under this plan would not receive cooling, but the main gym will receive a real rooftop cooling system. This would be doing the lighting and any other miscellaneous work. So when you walk into that gym, you're going to think it's a brand new gym. 950,000 is attributable to that. The next one is right from the electrical project that we received partial grant funding for. So this actually isn't part of the referendum, but it's tying together as part of the same project. We've been kind of going back and forth, including this, not including it, splitting it out because there's grants involved with it. But what we would do is we would push as much electrical work into that as we possibly could. So in that first line, the add cooling line, there is electrical included in that, but that's what I would refer to as the distribution. So that's the electrical needed to power those units. Whereas in the line with the electrical upgrades, that's the building electrical system. So think of like the main electrical closet in the building where you have all your switch gear for the new generator, you have all your building main panels, and then the distribution we do through the cooling. Through the cooling project. It's semantics because we're going to execute it all as one package, but we want to push as much as we can into that grant program. And that also has your full building generator on it. So to round out year one is the auditorium renovation. So that, again, just like the gym, that's a full renovation of the space. So it's important to know right now, as the project was originally designed, there still were pretty limited renovations to that auditorium. One of them being, I was talking to the mechanical engineer the other day, asking them about the ductwork in there, and they've never even been able to verify if the existing ductwork is insulated because they can't get into certain areas because the ceiling has asbestos. So we're going to go into this project, we're going to put in new seats, we're going to put in, maybe be able to do some work in the HVAC, and then in the middle of the project, we find out we can't access what we need to because we have an asbestos ceiling coating on there, okay? So we'll get rid of that while we're in it. We'll get rid of the asbestos flooring, put in new seating, all of the house lighting and production lighting equipment that was part of the original project, adding air conditioning into there, refurbishing your stage. There was no stage work into there. So you're going to put in $1 million lighting system on an old stage when to redo the stage is $50,000, so if that. So again, taking that as a unit and taking it offline and rehabbing it. So that's year one. So we're hitting the mechanical, we're hitting the buildings electrical, we're renovating the gym, we're renovating the auditorium. We're using, I would propose, this would be one of our next steps if we want to go down this road, is we engage Gilbane and say, hey, we're just going to alter the scope a little bit. Okay, we talked about a $14 million project. Now we're talking about, down at the bottom here, I rolled it up by year. We're close to 10. Do you want that work? I'm sure they'll say yes. We do a little bit more design and we package that up. In year two, so that's work that we could initiate now. We could start ordering long cycle equipment. A lot of the work would be done in probably summer of 2026. The rest of these, but we could work on this during the school year as well, the different pieces of it. The things like the auditorium and the gym we would want to hit during the summer, obviously, because there's hazardous materials. The rest of these items, 2, 3, and 4, are primarily summer work. So this is no impact during the school year. Obviously, in year two, we have the asbestos tile flooring that obviously requires the building to be shut down for the summer. Really big project, but really simple project. We're taking out all that old nasty carpeting that's in there, that comes out. Most of that has got asbestos tile underneath it. Just for napkin numbers, I carry 2/3 of the building and use numbers. I've done one of these projects every summer for the last 5 summers, so I have some pretty decent number on that. Again, very labor intensive project, tough to do in the summer, but we get the right contractor on board, we'll be able to do it. Also is we're tackling that roof replacement project. So the roof replacement project right now is in fiscal year 33. Peter and I were up in that roof the other day. That roof is not going to last till 2033. We are going to be putting patches everywhere. So we're tackling that in year 2, which would essentially be summer of 2027. I carried $40 a square foot. Roofing was as high as 50 a couple of years ago. Based on some big projects that were done this last summer, they've actually been seeing them closer to 30. So I put 40 in there because it's been going up and down. Right now, that project is in the SIP for 5.1. Again, easily reimbursable through the state construction program. It's an entitlement-based grant. Takes about a year again to get that off the ground. And we would hit the roof and get the envelope of that building tight. It's also nice because we'll have all our new rooftop units in place. We put all new flashing around them, and we don't have to worry about that for the next 20 to 30 years. The next year, we start getting into what I call the pretty work, which is just as important. Keep in mind, our existing project had no pretty work. The same ugly building we went into $20 million later was the same ugly building you're going into after that. So these years 3 and 4 in the scheme of things are short money, but this is going to make the building a pleasant place to be in. So first one is ceilings and lighting in common areas. So that's anything that has a suspended ceiling in it now, either gets its grid painted with new pads put in, new ceiling tiles put in. Small improvement, easy to do, labor intensive, but it changes the look and feel of your common spaces. At that time, we put in the most efficient LED lighting we can. Again, you'll hear me say this, but my theories on energy efficiency is you never do a project for energy efficiency alone in an old building. You go into a space, you renovate the space, and you do it with energy efficiency in mind. So that's what we would do here and get all our lighting up to snuff. Again, small dollar amount, relatively speaking, 542 we have on that project. I used about a third of the building's gross square footage for that. Next one, if we are over budget on any of these, like if we budgeted too much, I should say, it's the window replacement project. I used some projects I've done over the past couple of years to replace all the window systems, exterior window systems in the building. I based that on a gross square footage number, but the past few projects I've done of these were the old 1950s, 60s schools where the whole wing was a storefront kind of curtain wall system. This building has a couple of those wings, but the rest of it is very bunkerish, where it just has like smaller windows, but it does have some very interesting window systems, like the art room and above the gym. Interesting always means expensive. So I carried that number kind of to be on parity with the other projects I've done. Again, the state now does have full reimbursement for that, to your full reimbursement percentage. It used to be where the state would reimburse for the windows, but not the labor. That makes no sense. They did change that after years of lobbying for it a couple of years ago. So that number could actually be, $500,000, $700,000 less, but I wanted to just carry it a little high right now. Again, because we're further out, like any capital plan, year 4, your numbers are way more napkinish than year 2s are. The last summer are really pretty work that impact our customer spaces. Again, these are programs that I've deployed for years. One thing that school districts just fall in a trap of doing with their older buildings is they'll upgrade common areas, they'll upgrade curb appeal, they'll upgrade windows, they'll do the roofs, but nobody ever does anything to the classrooms besides some technology. So you'll walk into a school and you see like a new ProEyes board and then like the big chalkboard imprint behind it, right? So what I've done over the years is we do a project called Classroom Refreshers. This is like an oversized version of that. If a classroom has acoustical ceilings, we do the same thing like we did in the hallways. If it doesn't, I started years ago putting acoustical ceilings in classrooms. Then we did a test and took some of the 1950s, 60s buildings, and we simply prepped and sprayed the ceilings with the old Tectum decks and exposed beams. Exposed beams are like cool again anyway. People love it. Teachers would walk into these things and think they were in a new classroom. Again, while we're doing that, we put in efficient LED lighting. We paint the entire building. Another thing that works really well are in our millwork systems in these buildings. One approach is doing like we did at Brown and ripping them all out and putting new millwork in. That's great. It's nice if you could afford to do that. But when you're doing a large school like this, I've done cabinet doors. A lot of this old millwork is really well built. You could paint it up, put new doors on. Again, you think sometimes new sink top. You'll think you're walking into and looking at new work. And then blinds. Blinds are another simple one, but you walk around at the old school, you see broken blinds, all that kind of stuff. You do that, about $13,000 a space. I carried 50. There's less classrooms than that in the building, but I wanted to make sure I was hitting like, psychologists' offices and things like that. And that'll transform those spaces with short money. The last one is the ultimate pretty work one. It's just painting the common areas. So after kind of a few years of construction there, and this is one also, if we get to the end of we get to year 4 and we're running out of money, then we push that off and we bump up our O&M budget, or we do some of this work in-house. There's no, rush to do that. But the classrooms are all going to be covered in the classroom one. So this will be prettying up the hallway interior spaces. So when we put all that stuff together, our total is about $23 million. We've got in our kind of pro forma construction budget, this is if we add the electrical work, the grant money in, and then we take the $3.5 million back that went over to NEC. I'm calling that a pro forma construction budget of 21.4. That also includes money the 21.4 includes money that's already been spent. I could walk you through how I developed that in a minute. But that we'd be about $1.5 million over still. But after grants, we're $1.2 million under. So again, I hate giving like really solid numbers 4 years out. This gives that range that, like, what, this passes the gut check for me that it is in the realm of possibility to happen, and we can at least get the important stuff rolling year 1. I can't resist. So let me show you a little bit of how we built the budget here. So a referendum was 21.5 million. We take out the funds that were transferred to Neck River that we know we could recover. We're at about 18. The generator project with its $1.5 million in grants, the rest of it coming from SIP that's been approved and allocated, 3.1. As of 8/5, when I did this, we've spent and encumbered about $1 million on the project so far. So that leaves us about 20 million. Expected additional non-construction costs. These are all our soft costs. I took them right from the original Collier's thing. So this would be things like, design work and any other soft costs that are in there of 1.6. That leaves us with $18 million, 18.4 for construction. If we get the money back from Neck River, that leads us to 21.9. The second piece here is kind of a little reconciliation. What I'm calling the advertised budget is what we went out to when we did our CM RFP, where we were targeting $14.8 million of construction without the electrical, 17.9 in. That's what we've been comparing on all these value engineering schedules. That number came in, if you take the advertised construction budget, this is pro forma with electrical and the NEC funds added back, you're 21.4, whereas I was at 21.9. I used the lower number just to be safe. And this would also help when you talk to the community about this. That 21.4 is like the number that's been out there, so to speak. But that's what we're actually left with to construction. So we're there. We're where we would need to be to get all this work done. And I'm tired of talking, so let's do questions.
So this is great. And everyone will have a chance to talk on the committee. It sounds really good. I love the fact that we are going into a space, doing everything that needs to be done in that space, and not just going in and putting lipstick on a pig, as they say, but we're actually going in there and making it look good, making it safe for students, and finally getting rid of the problems that have always existed there and we have never been able to attack. So I think that's great. I think the cooling of the classrooms is awesome. And I think those 2 major spaces where we have the gym and we have the auditorium done right the first time, I think is great. I love the fact that the roof is a possibility, of doing the roof, pulling it out of CIP, which I think will be great. So I love this plan, and I love the the strategic planning that went into this, and not the fear that we have to continue the path, because that's the path we were on. I love that kind of being able to pivot and do something right and meaningful for these buildings that, in my opinion, this building, which in my opinion has been woefully neglected, and needs this badly. So I'll let anyone else speak who wants to.
I totally agree, Jean, with everything you've said. I love that the building gets an actual refresh and makeover and feels new and feels fresh for students and families, because it is, like you said, Ben, it's a weird building. But this will feel good. And I also love that the items that the voters really heard, I feel like, are the HVAC, the auditorium, and those are going to get done. The cooling is going to get done in that first year. So like the big ticket items that everyone's expecting are going to get done early in the process, and it'll just continue. So I think that makes me feel good in terms of talking about the project with the community. And I mean, also, I'm thrilled that we don't need to move students around. Like, I know we could have made it work. It would not have been fun, but it seems, it's great. I'm great.
And one other thing, just the idea that we're not losing any of the money we've already invested in this process.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
using what's there. So I love that fact.
Yeah.
We're not, you
Yeah.
know, we're using what we have. So that's great. Galen?
Yeah, thank you. Ben, that was great. And I just want to echo Jean and Emily's comments. I have a couple particular questions concerning the rooftop units. Are we using the same vendor that we used for hand recently?
No, that every one of these projects would be bid.
Okay. And then this is just a general question. I love the fact that you're adding cooling to all the classrooms, and you can use the existing building system vents and things. So this is just a general question. What's the pace of HVAC technology? So in other words, what I'm getting at is, if it's not a 30-year solution, that's okay with me, because things could be very different and more efficient in 30 years than now. 10 years, but is it moving pretty quickly, I guess is my question, right?
Yeah, so I think what I've seen change just in the past couple of years specifically in terms of schools, is everybody has become obsessed with these, they call them DOAS systems, direct outdoor air, or ERVs, energy recovery ventilation, which essentially what it's doing is it's adding a whole bunch of ductwork to the building. And instead of the way a building's set up, these older buildings are set up now, where they exhaust air all day long. And basically, because your building isn't as tight as a new building, the building breathes, which I look at as a good thing. It's constantly pulling air out of the building, and you're getting your air from outside, and then you have operable windows, which meet your code there. What has become all the rage are putting in these ERVs, which basically means there's a separate ventilation component to the space, where you're sucking air out of the building. The air that's coming out of the building is passing through a heat exchanger, the air coming into the building, and preheating it. Then you precondition that air, dump that into the room, and then there's something else in the room providing the primary heating and cooling. That has become the rage. There are issues with that. It sounds like it's really energy efficient, but in some ways it is, because you're capturing, some of the heat loss that's going through the building for your incoming air. But it's another system. It's another system you have to maintain. There are sometimes customer complaints because that air that's coming out of those vents is cooler than air that's coming out of your heating vents in the winter or cooling in the summer. So you get kind of that perceived feel of cooler air dropping on you. We dealt with that a lot in office buildings. But to answer your question, like, there isn't, like, I haven't seen in the past 10 years, like, groundbreaking new, like, this is the way to do everything. There's been a lot of advancement in controls. The heating side of things has stayed pretty stable. We've been using rooftop units on buildings for, 60 years now. So things are always moving. There's always the latest and greatest out there. VRF has come a long way in the past 10 years, where 10 years ago, I would never have recommended this, especially because it would just be unsightly. You'd have 40 units hanging on the outside of the building, 40 different things to break. Now you're truly zoning to the point now where you could actually, heat and cool simultaneously. Another advantage of these systems too is you do get supplemental heating. So if there's an issue, say with the central boiler plant in the winter, as long as it's not, below 8 degrees outside, we actually use those for heating as well. So it's a nice redundancy.
Nice.
Thank you. And then one thing, will the auxiliary gym be uncooled as is?
It would be, yeah.
Okay.
So we wouldn't be cooling the auxiliary gym.
Can you just, I'm not sure about what happens in the auxiliary gym. I don't know, Craig or Peter, or someone who knows how that gym is used.
Yeah,
mean-
so it's basically used as a classroom for PE in the beginning of the year. Gymnastics takes it over around November, late November, and then gives it back around late March. They always, go pretty far in their season, and it's a great program for us. But they do basically take that over. I think what we'd like to do long term is use that as a classroom space for gymnastics eventually. But it's a project. I think at some point we'll need to address it, get cooling in there, and probably redo the gym. But it's lower on the scale for us. Certainly, I think getting the field house redone. It was built in '89. I don't think there's been a lot done to it since. It's definitely due new bleachers and lighting, and this would be fantastic for our athletes, students.
We
Great.
could always add a project in after this. Once we've done one gym, we'll have really good numbers on doing another. And then we put that out in our SIP, even if you put that 6 years out or whatever, just to keep that project alive. And with our electrical upgrade, we'll have the capacity to add later on as well. So
Right. That is an important point.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do at this point, if Emily and Galen are comfortable, I'd like to vote to move forward on this as our recommendation for what should be done. Is that something you two are comfortable with?
Oh, absolutely.
Good.
I think it's fabulous. I just have one last question, which is,
Uh-huh.
I love the fact, everything about this, the fact that you're adding cooling to all the classrooms, that you're redoing the auditorium, and you're prettifying the building, so that the students, staff, and the public sees the improvements. But if you had to boil this down to one sentence, just how were we able to avoid overruns and do more? What would that sentence be? Do you know what I'm asking? It's like,
yeah, no, I know. I'm thinking of the perfect sentence. My instinct is I tried distilling this down into a paragraph, which I did successfully do for Dr. Cook. I've got to take my paragraph and make it a sentence. So let me think on that.
sentences. Yeah. Okay.
I'll get that to you. That challenge accepted right there.
All right. Thank you.
Good. Okay,
think you
so
said-
go ahead.
Just at the beginning, like it's an incremental approach to stay with the capital that we have and maximize the improvements. Like that's what stuck out to me as the take home message that I would feel comfortable saying, but I'm sure you'll come up with something even better then. But
All right. We want the how as well.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think
And
the
I
big
How is what
wanna-
I got to get you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to see that sentence. Like this is not
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
sentence.
I do too.
All
Yeah, you're
the
not-
No,
answers.
everybody's getting it. Yeah. Yeah.
I think the big thing that you could be asked is why would it cost 21 million to do or 26 million to do the HVAC project before? Now this one is, much lower. I think the fact that we're not putting ductwork in throughout the entire building is the big piece of that, right, Ben? And in terms of
Yeah. We're avoiding major surgery. So
Yeah.
we're adding something onto the building, and we're also replacing the existing systems that are perfectly fine and working, they're at the end of life, but there's no problem with their design, and replacing those in kind. But yeah, we're avoiding major surgery to the building, and old buildings, they reject major surgery.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
maybe
Consider
and
it laparoscopic.
Right.
and-
Very
and
small
maybe-
change orders when you're adding. When you start digging into a building, we could tell you from the restroom project we're doing over there now. It's change
Yeah.
order city, and it's nobody's fault. You start
Right.
getting into it, and you're like, oh my God.
Right.
Yeah.
And then maybe a better use of grants over time. Schedule of grants coming
Definitely.
in.
That's why I was having trouble making it one sentence, because that's a part of it too.
Okay. Thank you.
Good. Okay, so can I, and Ben, you'll get us all that and you might have already, I'm not sure if it's in my inbox, but why don't we say, I'm gonna need a motion to recommend to, I guess it goes to the selectmen, is that correct? Just want to make sure process I'm right. Do we recommend to the selectmen? Who knows? Anybody? Anyone?
I believe that would be the next step. That's my understanding.
Okay, so I need a motion to approve the updated project. Let's see, what's the timeline?
I call it a project plan. Yeah.
Project plan as presented by Ben this morning.
So moved.
Second.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. So as of right now, then, I think we're good with this. Does that end the committee's work?
I just have one thing I just want to
Go ahead.
ask. We've got Gilbane in a holding pattern here.
Okay,
If the committee's comfortable, I will present this to Gilbane and just say, this is the direction we're thinking. I don't want to make an adversary out of them. I want them to be a partner in this. So I don't want to leave them hanging for too long. So I'm on vacation next week, but I will bait the hook with them this week and then set something up for the week after next and walk them through this.
and that's why I wanted to get the vote done so that you can do that. Now it's our recommendation to move forward. So now it's public, it can be talked about, and that I think is really important so that we can get moving and get them involved. So absolutely.
I'll
as
try to
of
set up a
today.
call with them for tomorrow, actually, just to
Yep.
get it, just because I don't want them hearing about it third hand.
Yeah.
And we'll go from there.
Yep, that sounds great. All right, is that it then for the committee work? Peter, do you know, is there anything else or can we wrap up the committee?
No, I think we're all set. That's everything we wanted to go over.
Okay,
You mean in terms of the committee as a whole, Gene, or as terms of
Yeah.
this meeting? I
right.
think in terms of the committee as a whole, my understanding, I gotta go back and look, it was set up for HVAC for Daniel Hand.
Oh,
and Polson.
okay,
And
okay.
so I think there could be the wrap up of those projects, and then I'd have to check to the rest of the projects like the auditorium and
Have to keep coming
flooring,
back.
go back to the board
Okay.
board facilities committee. So
Okay.
I'll just check on that. And I'll let you-
Sure, great.
Yeah,
So
I'd
we will,
recommend just having been involved in a couple of these, like you have the committee stood up. It still is an HVAC and auditorium project. It's just, it's the same project packaged differently, so to speak.
so I would imagine then even then we have to vote for payments and stuff, I would assume. So all right, so go ahead.
I'm sorry, yeah, I think I think the committee's got to stay intact, at least
Right.
the bonding part of the project.
Yeah, okay. So we will stay intact, but we will now move forward that with our recommendation and we will meet as needed. When Raquel tells us she needs us, we will come. And if anything else comes up, we can also do that. Okay?
Hey, this was like hitting a bunch of 3-pointers to win the game after being 17 points down.
That's how I feel. We need to
Yeah.
do a victory lap.
Says the guy who's fleeing the country right now.
Perfect timing.
Good. All
Great.
right, everybody, and motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Everybody have a great day.